All right, in this explainer, we're going to tackle a huge question, one that every single leader has to face. When you're managing a team, what are you actually trying to do? What's the end game? To get to the bottom of this, we're actually going to travel back in time, right, to the very beginning of management science. So let's get into it.
So let's really start there. When you're building a team, what are you trying to achieve? I mean, you get put in charge of a project, a whole department. What is the real goal? It sounds super simple on the surface, but nailing this down is, well, it's everything. It's the difference between a team that flies and a team that fails. So what are those foundational pillars of good management?
Well, believe it or not, a really solid answer starts more than 100 years ago with this guy, Frederick Taylor. Now, Taylor was a total pioneer. He was one of the first people to look at work scientifically and figure out how to squeeze the most productivity out of it. And you know what? His framework gives us a surprisingly clear and really powerful answer to that big question we just asked.
And here they are. It's kind of brilliant in its simplicity. Taylor basically took all the messy, complicated stuff about management and boiled it down to just 3 basic objectives. Number 1, select the best people you can possibly find. Number 2, teach them the absolute best way to do the job. And number 3, motivate your best workers to keep being the best. That's it. This 3-step plan is going to be our roadmap for the rest of this discussion.
Okay, let's tackle that first objective, selecting the best people. We're going to start right at the beginning, because for Taylor, this was the most critical step of all. It really all comes down to who you bring on board in the first place. And Taylor was, well, he was dead serious about this. For him, hiring the right person wasn't just a good idea, it was an absolute necessity. Why? Because, look, tools and processes are great, but the biggest difference in performance, it's almost always between people. The real foundation of an amazing team isn't some fancy new process. It's the individuals on that team.
And this point really drives home why this is so important. I mean, just think about it for a second. You can give 2 different people the exact same tools, the same training, the same everything, and their results can be worlds apart. The source material is crystal clear on this. The biggest variations in performance come down to the individuals themselves. So getting that hire right from day 1, that is your biggest, most powerful lever for success, period.
Okay, so you've done it. You hired the best person you could find. Awesome. But what's next? You can't just throw them in the deep end and hope they swim, right? Of course not. And that brings us right to Taylor's second big objective, instruction.
So Taylor's second area of focus was all about instruction. He was a big believer that for pretty much any task, there was one single best method to do it. And for managers, that means you've got to carefully plan out how you bring people on board and constantly check in to see what kind of training they need. See, it's not enough just to hire amazing people. You have to give them the best possible roadmap for success. If you think about what that means today, we're talking about things like a really solid, structured onboarding program, right? And continuous professional development. You just can't assume that people will figure things out on their own. The key takeaway here is that a manager's job is to be constantly asking, does my team have the skills and the knowledge they need to crush it?
All right, so let's recap. We've selected the best people, and we've trained them in the best methods. We're 2/3 of the way there. But how do you make sure they keep performing at that high level day in and day out? Well, this brings us to the final and maybe the most controversial piece of Taylor's puzzle.
Let's not sugarcoat it. Taylor's third big concern was, pretty simply, how to get people to work harder. And his solution was a model for motivation that, honestly, you still see all over the place today. Think about things like piece rates on a factory line or sales commissions. The core idea was super straightforward. Tie their pay directly to their performance. But this is where things can get a little tricky, especially when new tech or new processes come along and change the whole game.
And this right here is the heart of what people started calling the Taylorist model of motivation. For Taylor, the answer to how do you motivate people was simple. It was money. He was a huge advocate for systems like piece rates, where you get paid for each thing you make and just paying your most productive people more. The logic was perfectly clear. If you want more of a certain behavior, you reward it. But you and I both know it's not quite that simple, right? Especially not today. As the source material rightly points out, Taylorism gets a lot of criticism for being, well, a little too simple and mechanistic. It kind of treats people like they're just machines. You put money in, and you get work out. And we know now that that's just not the whole story when it comes to what really motivates people. So there you have it. That's the framework. Select the best, instruct them in the best methods, and motivate them with the right incentives. It's a model that's over 100 years old. And that leaves us with a really important question for today, doesn't it? In our super complex workplaces, with all the creative work and tricky challenges we face, how much of this century-old advice still actually works? Which parts is still the absolute bedrock of good management? And what new things have we figured out since Taylor's time?